Hi there. In this video I am going to show you how easy it is to create a perennial cutting bed similar to this one here in less than a year at very limited cost. So it's something that you can create quickly, so within the space of one growing season, and with just the cost of a few packets of seeds. So if you're interested, then stay tuned. Hi, I'm Nicola and I'm a home gardener from Shropshire in the UK, which I believe is zone 8 if we're talking US zones, and I like to grow cut flowers so that I can fill my house with colour and fragrance and not have to buy flowers from the supermarket. I also like to do it with the minimum fuss, time and money so that I can make it as efficient and productive as possible. So this bed that you see behind me was not there this time last year. In the autumn, probably September time, I created the bed using a no-dig method. So the initial bed was just, or the initial area was just lawn, and actually it was rather rubbish lawn. It was a bit lumpy and bumpy, and my husband refused to cut it as much as he needed to, so it was always a mess, and which was why we had nettles growing in it and thistles. It's also near the field, but it was very frustrating because it was right next to my cutting patch, so I always had these long strands of grass and nettles moving into my cutting patch from this really rubbish area of the garden. So I thought I would make it something beautiful and stop the grass from immediately getting into the garden. So this cutting bed is about 6 metres long and 3 metres wide. So that's 3 metres squared in total. Strangely enough, all my beds seem to be about 3 metres squared in one form or another. So it's not that big, and it's certainly not that deep. But it has got a lot packed into it. So I created a no-dig bed. Now what that means is all I did was lay cardboard over the surface and then covered it with compost. I made my own homemade compost from all of the cuttings and everything from the garden. So that was just laid on top, probably a good 10 centimetres deep, and that was it. I then planted in my plants and bulbs, and the plants were something that I grew throughout that season from seed. So I had lupins, as you can see. There's lupins in the bed. They've all gone to seed now, but they're lupins. Achillea I grew from seed. There's some geum. I think that's it. So those plants I grew from seed. Because they were from seed, I could grow quite a lot of plants. So that filled quite a bit of the bed. I also added in some peonies. I bought cheaply in the spring and just potted them up, and I wasn't really sure where they were going to go, but then in the end I put them in here. At the same time, I also planted in some bulbs. So I had tulips, a range of them. They were an excess to what I'd already bought for the cutting patch, so they just went in anyway. So I had some tulip bulbs, and they intentionally were meant to flower at different stages of the spring, so that there would be something flowering for a longer time period. And I also put in alliums. I love alliums, so they were never not going to be in the border. The alliums I put in 3 different varieties, and again that was to extend their life. So I had Purple Sensation, which is quite a bright purple allium. I had a I don't know what it's called, a different one that was more of a deeper burgundy and more, not as round a shape, a bit more fancy. And then I have the Drumstick allium, which is still in flower now. So they flowered in that sequence. So they were all planted last autumn, and then I put a layer of Strolch, which is a straw-like compound. I'll put a link below to it actually. It's supposed to deter slugs and weeds, so I thought, well, I'll give that a bash. So I put that down as well and then left it. So did nothing else to it until the spring. In fact, I did nothing else to it. But spring came and we saw the first signs of growth. And that came with the popping up of the peonies, the lupins, all of the plants, tulips and achillea. And also the first emergence of the tulips and the alliums. Now, because it's a perennial bed, all of the things that I planted die back in the winter. So I could see nothing in the winter, but come the spring, everything started emerging, and we now have the shoots of all of those perennial plants. Thankfully, we had a cold winter and they didn't die, so thankfully, from sowing as a seed earlier the previous year to getting planted out and overwintering in the ground to then emerging again the next year was brilliant for me. It worked. I did it. So they grew. The tulips flowered first, and we had a range of those. They were just sprinkled in between all of the plants. The alliums probably, and the geums started, and then the achillea, and everything else kind of emerged together. Now, is there anything disappointing? Well, the peonies, not one single one flowered. So I have a leaf, but no flowers. As it's only the second year, I don't know whether that was to be expected. It was disappointing, yes, but whether it was to be expected, I don't know. I had expected to see a flower somewhere along the line, maybe not enough to form any sort of floral arrangement, but I'd hoped to see something so I knew what colours they were going to be and whatever. We got nothing, so hopefully next year we have a bit better success. If we get nothing next year, I don't know what I'll do, but that was that. The geums that I sowed from seed flowered. The majority of them flowered. The stems were not that long, so not really that useful for cutting yet, and they haven't flowered for very long. However, one geum that was a bought plant, so was more established than seedlings, has flowered from the get-go. So it's one of the first to flower and is still flowering now. So hopefully next year all of the other geums will be the same. So that will be fantastic. The lupins have not stopped flowering since they started. So we've had probably a month and a half of lupins flowering. And I've been picking them, and they've come back with the small second flush. So fantastic. Achillea has been flowering as well, and so I haven't really picked that because I've got loads in the rest of the garden, so that has just been doing its thing. And the alliums, I mean, you just have to take a look at it now. If you look down, you'll see all of the alliums, so they pace themselves out really quite nicely. So we have the Purple Sensation first, and actually when they were finishing, the next lot were coming up, and then when the next lot were coming up, the drumsticks were coming out. So I have had, again, a series of alliums on the go for well over a month. Interestingly, some poppies self-seeded themselves in here, and they've been rather lovely as well. So, in the space of less than a year, this flower bed has become a working cutting garden. A successful perennial cutting patch in less than a year for just the cost of some seeds and a few peony tubers. So maybe £10 in total, and I've got all of this. You can do it too. If you want to learn how to do it, it's easy. And if you want to learn how to grow some seeds, then this video that I will link in shows you the basics of growing seeds. So you don't need much kit for that, and you'll get started, and this time next year, you could have something as productive as this.